Hello and welcome to Witness. I'm Raggy Omar. The United States military has roughly 525,000 soldiers on active duty around the world. But every year, a handful of those volunteers experience a change of heart and apply to be processed out of the service as conscientious objectors. But of course, it's not a simple matter. Having signed up to fight, these soldiers have to satisfy the authorities that their newly acquired objections are indeed genuine, that they are now opposed morally to all war in all forms. So much so that to be legally discharged from the military is considered the most difficult process a service member can go through. In his film, The Path of Most Resistance, director Gareth Ki AAG follows the process through the very different experiences of two servicemen who, after signing their enlistment contracts and being sent to war, chose to take a different path, the path of most resistance.
The military is geared toward one goal, accomplishing the mission. But if finally you can't cooperate with that goal, then everything in the military grates against you.
There's a challenge there. You've got someone in today's voluntary army who signed up and said, I will give my life to support whatever the commander-in-chief gives me an order to do. So you go from that to being against all war in all form. And that's a pretty significant change.
I certainly think that had I not felt any sort of moral obligation to get out of the military, I think I could have done well in the military. You know, I wouldn't have applied for conscientious objector status if it wasn't something that was incredibly serious and important to me.
Lieutenant Colonel Ann Edgecombe is a spokesperson for Army Public Affairs based at the Pentagon. The Special Court-Martial Convening Authority, also based here, makes the final decision on all conscientious objectors, or COs.
Well, even in an all-volunteer force, we understand that people's beliefs change. They can change based on an experience before they came in the Army that maybe was solidified once they were in the Army, or it can change based on an experience they've had since joining. So we recognize that, and that's why we have this process and why it's so thorough. A 1O conscientious objector is someone who is opposed to war in any form because of deeply held religious beliefs or ethical or moral beliefs, not political, sociological, those kind of beliefs.
Michael Baxter is a professor of theology at Notre Dame University and has been supporting conscientious objectors for nearly 20 years. He is a member of the Catholic Peace Fellowship, a pacifist organization also involved with a number of social initiatives, such as this homeless shelter in northern Indiana.
In the Catholic Peace Fellowship, we try to provide resources so people know that if they're being mistreated, there are people to turn to help them with their claims. Even if that involves just getting information on the web. It's got to be out there. The big change from the Vietnam time until now has been that people in the military don't get drafted, they join up, they're volunteers. So the biggest difficulty is when people become conscientious objectors, now they have to explain why they joined in the first place.
Robert Weiss joined the US Army in 2005. He was first deployed to Iraq as a cavalry scout in August of 2007 and applied for CO status on June 6th, 2 months before his deployment.
When I was 16 years old, I was kicked out of my house, and I still had 2 years of high school left, so I didn't really know what to do. And I eventually decided, well, maybe the best thing for me would be to join the military. I mean, I have nowhere to live, I have no money, I have no job, I don't have a car, I don't even have a driver's license. So really, the only possibility that I have for having a place to live and the means to get by would be to join the military. At the time I joined the Army, I really lost all sense of faith, all real connection with Christianity, with God. I was on Christmas leave from the Army. I had 2 weeks to go home in December of 2006. On New Year's, my sister's boyfriend had gone out to a New Year's Eve party. He got into an argument, and the argument, turned into a fist fight. And then the kid that he was fighting pulled out a knife, stabbed him in the chest. He died waiting for the ambulance to get there. And that was like a huge turning point in my life because it really made me think, I'm not guaranteed another day. I thought like if I did die right now, I would have to stand before God, and it wouldn't be good enough for me to say, well, hey, I had fun, I got drunk, I went to the strip club. Certainly that's not gonna be the means for my salvation. So I said, wow, I really need to change my life. So I really started taking religion seriously. I brought God back into my life, and I started reading my Bible a lot after that.
It's basically 2 houses of hospitality, one for women, one for men. We just take in homeless people or people who are down on their luck. We just try to provide a home atmosphere as compared to a shelter atmosphere. This is 515 South St. Joseph Street, Catholic Worker House, South Bend.
Daniel Baker joined the US Navy in June of 2004. He served as a communications officer stationed in Qatar from June of 2006 and applied for CO status soon after his deployment.
I saw in the military a chance to make something out of myself, a chance to really succeed in life, to have an honorable profession, an honorable job, to help those in need. I guess it did strike me a little bit how little there was in the way of talk about humanitarian aid, humanitarian work. There was a lot more focus on mission accomplishment, as in killing the enemy.
I was involved in the first Gulf War with conscientious objectors, and one of the biggest difficulties for people in the military at that time was that they joined figuring they'd never fight in a war. People had such an abstract notion of fighting that when the prospect of actually entering combat arose, these people thought about what they were doing for the first time.
It became real to me over a period of time. I began to see that my career wasn't really fulfilling what I thought it would for me, as in meaning and purpose in my life. I wasn't helping anyone. No one else I knew in the military was really helping people in the way that I thought I'd be helping people, in a humanitarian sense, in a relief role, defending those who cannot defend themselves. And so that got me thinking. I started looking at philosophy, and I stumbled upon a Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh, which was my first introduction to the theory and the practice of nonviolence. I started to see how it could be possible to solve conflicts without killing people, through peaceful resolution, through living peace, not just preaching it.
Well, certainly it creates a conflict of interest in that, I can't simultaneously love my enemies, and I can't profess to love my enemies if I'm out there gunning them down, shooting them in the streets, kicking in doors. I couldn't satisfy both following the interests of our government and our military and also following the interests of God.
The process starts when a soldier declares that he's a conscientious objector. At that point, the commander will then counsel the soldier and explain what his rights are, and not rights like reading him his rights, but just the things that he will give up if he is processed out of the Army, things like veterans benefits, things like that you get once you serve your obligation to the Army.
And I realized, well, first that as a conscientious objector, I would lose a lot of my benefits, even if my application was approved. I'm not completing my contract, so therefore I might have to pay back my bonus. Obviously, it didn't really take much for me to come to terms with that, because on the one hand, I could facilitate people dying, people being in hell and suffering for eternity there, or on the other hand, I could give up my bonus, and it's not obviously something you have to really contemplate or dwell on too long.
The next step is for the soldier to actually initiate the packet, and that's outlined in Army Regulation 600-43. It has a very specific guidelines for everyone from the soldier to what the commander needs to do to what the General Court Martial Convening Authority would need to do in this process. As far as providing legal assistance is concerned, the Army typically doesn't do that, but clearly a soldier can seek legal advice outside the Army.
I did not know about the application at the time. Even after going to see a chaplain or two and talking with people in my command, no one really knew about the actual process. They all thought there was a way I could get out because of my beliefs, but none of them really knew of the application process.
And even I requested to talk to a lawyer in the military just to get, you know, additional advice from the actual military source. And in calling them, I was informed that the only way I could have legal counsel on conscientious objection would be if my unit approved my application in the first place.
Join me after the break as the past catches up with one of our conscientious objectors.